3, 2, 1. So, big week for this week, Lewis, for us. We uploaded the first episode. As of right now, 19 views, 5 subscribers. We've absolutely popped off. Personally, a big week for me. Grew a moustache.
Yeah,
Shaved that in.
Yeah, as I'm sure the viewers are immediately aware of, jumping on the screen today. Something different.
Nice little surprise for people that watch the fairly budget video that we put on every week onto YouTube. Trying to work out how to get things on Spotify as well, so hopefully that'll be up and running the next week. Apparently we need some RSS feed.
Yeah, apparently like these sort of things are just done through some sort of software which automatically uploads it onto different platforms. I don't know, this is a learning experience. I was recommended that people that are skilled with these type of things can just code it themselves, just put up a wee code which will automatically let iTunes, Spotify and Twitter know that we're uploading, but that seems very unlikely for both of us. So
yeah, it seems a little bit beyond us. We'll just stick to the discussions, I think.
Right.
Keep struggling along.
As
if you didn't know, this is Guide to the 21st Century, a conversational podcast between two friends, Lewis and I, discussing topical issues and trying to navigate the minefield that is life in the 21st century.
Yep. So that's us, Scott and I. We will be going away each single week, and we'll be thinking of a little topic that we've been playing around in our minds. We want to discuss, and we'll basically bring this up in our in this conversational format, and hopefully kind of disseminate our views and come to some type of conclusion. And I think we've decided that we kind of we want to try and tune down our introductions a little bit. I realised in the first episode it was around about 15 minutes long before we actually got to starting. So I suppose on that note, I'll just jump right into it this week.
Sure, go right on. So
this week I've talked about a relatively topical issue, and because this all started on TikTok of all places, and it was actually my sister that let me know about this, and it's this phenomenon that's known as being super straight, right? Which I don't know if you heard about this. Or...
I had not heard about this, and when you mentioned it, I had to think about it for a little while until I realised what it could possibly be. But yeah, it sounds very, very strange to me. Or does it? I don't know.
That's the thing. Yeah, I'm completely the same place as you. So apparently this actually was a joke at first. This was just literally a joke video. Someone posted a TikTok and they were like, "Hey y'all, I'm tired of getting all the hate that I'm getting from trans people out there because I say that I'm not attracted to trans people. So I've went away and I've made up my own sexuality. And my sexuality is that I'm attracted to people of the opposite gender that were born that gender." And the idea was that I'm making up the sexuality because people are getting pissed off at me, so you can't get pissed off at me anymore. And it was just supposed to be, it was literally posted to TikTok. This was supposed to be like a 15-second video that was supposed to become forgotten to like the annals of TikTok posts. But it basically picked up like a huge amount of traction in like absolutely no time. And basically the LGBTQ plus community started coming down really, really hard on this guy. Really, really hard.
I think first of all, when you say the LGBTQ plus community came down hard on this guy, I think we should probably clarify that the only people that came down hard on him were the activist people on Twitter, right?
Sure. Okay. Well, that I can get to that in a moment. When I say the LGBT plus community, I mean the reaction from LGBTQ plus vocal members on the internet was very, very strong.
Because I think one thing that we can say with some certainty about the people that are like vocally screaming these opinions is that they don't represent the general view of the vast majority of these people. I don't think by any means.
Most of these people aren't trans, they just have this stupid thought. Because I looked it up actually, just before I researched on the topic. I looked up what is super straight, and I went to the first 6 links, and one of them was just informational and giving you a little history of what happened, and each and every one of them was like extremely defamatory and talking about how this is an alt-right movement and how this is associated with trolls and how this is extremely hurtful. And actually I sent you the link earlier on to the official LGBTQ plus wikia where they have this, and this is basically the database of where people keep the sexualities that day to day are being invented, because like there are currently a list of several hundreds of sexualities, and it's been posted onto this page and it's been openly derided. Like there's a notification box at the top which literally tells you like, caution, this page is not endorsed by the community, and read at your own risk, read at your own warning, because this is inherently offensive in nature, type of thing. So I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
like,
So the comment box says this identity is not part of the LGBT plus community. This wiki in no way supports this identity and does not accept this identity into the community. This article is strictly educational. Education on these terms is important so people can stay safe online and know what to avoid. And then it
sure.
also comes with a subsequent warning that says this article contains discussion of topics which may be upsetting to some readers. This article is intended to be educational. It says education, but I assume it means educational. But reader discretion is advised.
Sure. So that was that's the opinion that you're immediately when you immediately find when you just look this up into Google. Like I know that we've literally done an episode talking about how Google keeps track of your recommendations and changes your search results because of that. And even with that in mind, I was being shown these videos which had a massive bias towards defaming the idea of this movement. And see, to be honest with you, I kind of like what you said when I first approached this. I wasn't exactly sure how I felt about it. I was like, wait a second, is that actually discriminatory? Is the concept of coming up of like saying that you are sexually attracted to people that are exclusively not trans, is that wrong? It's because when I did my research, that basically seems to be the core of where the outrage comes from. It's the very fact that this movement is exclusionary is basically it specifies not trans people, and people are saying that the very act of excluding trans people from the sexuality is transphobic, and that's where the rub comes in. So the first thing I want to just get over with and talk to you about, is this discriminatory?
I think that, as usual, two sides have came to heads here, and that they're sort of like, the answer is like somewhere in the middle. So I think, first of all, this guy's probably posted this thing on TikTok, and he's meant it to be like a sort of like shock factor thing. Like, you know, when you say
This was a joke. This was literally a joke.
When you say this thing was going to be lost to TikTok, I think this guy like posted it in the hope that he would like get a reaction for it. You know, that's kind of the point of the post, so that people will look at it and there will be some sort of outcry online. It'll gain some sort of traction. I think that's the hope with most of these things. Like if someone puts out a tweet or they put out an Instagram post or a TikTok, they want it to blow up. That's what they want, right? When they put out, you're not making a TikTok so that people won't see it. You know, that's exactly the opposite reason why you're making it. So I think there's an element of the post itself that is supposed to induce these feelings.
Sure.
Now, when I say it's somewhere in the middle, I'm coming at it from the angle that this is probably a reasonable thing for someone to feel and someone to think, but there's a way to speak about it and there's a way to sort of behave about it as well.
Okay.
So the guys came across as it comes across as quite deflammatory. Like, you know, it's like he comes out and he's like, yeah, you say, you know, I'm just not into those trans people kind of thing, and it's like, well, that's kind of offensive in the beginning, but
sure.
If you look at it in terms of, like, we did a little topic or a little background on like what being gay was in the first week of the show, and we spoke about how, like, we thought that a lot of your sexual urges come from like a biological drive to survive, which is something that I believe in. I believe that all your sexual urges come from the biological want to reproduce. Now, if you are straight and you say, for example, you know, I'm male, and I would say I was straight. So when it comes to someone I want to be with a female, and I want to have the option in my future of having children. You know, right. I want that to be something that I can do down the line. Having kids, I think it's probably something that I eventually want to get around to.
That is a very valid point for someone to have when you're thinking about long-term relationships with someone.
And I think it's probably either subconsciously or consciously, it is at the forefront of your mind when you think about a potential partner. You think about someone who'd be a good mother/father. You think about someone who would be a good partner for you to round you off and to then help you raise a child.
Exactly.
So if we're talking about someone who was born a male and then becomes a trans woman or is a trans woman, that's not someone that's possible with, is it? As far as I'm aware, on any like biological level, I couldn't have a child with like a trans woman.
It's very difficult. Basically, you need to, from my understanding, is that in order for that to happen, you need to have captured genetic material before any long-term transitions, and there are also a lot more legal loopholes and bureaucracy that needs to be overcome due to the fact that you are now identifying yourself as a trans person. So it can be done. You can choose to. There are, science is incredible, and there are ways about it, but it's very, very difficult. If you want to have like 4 or 5 kids, it's not going to happen.
That would only be the case though for someone who was transitioning from female to male, right? If they captured like something before, like they couldn't. If someone was going from male to female, there would be no way in which DNA could be captured there that could then be like, I don't know, mixed with my DNA to then have a child, right?
Yeah, I guess it depends on what the transition is of what gender they're moving from. Obviously, if they could only capture like sperm beforehand, you will not be able to both two people, if you are a man, make a new person.
Yes.
So it depends. You could also just go down the route of like artificial insemination and surrogates and donors and stuff like that. That's what I mean to say. Like the avenues aren't closed for you, but yes, it's very, very difficult.
I understand what you're saying when you say that there are other routes such as artificial insemination, surrogacy, and stuff like that. But I also wouldn't hold it against someone if they were to say, I don't want to do those things and I want to go down a natural route of like childbirth. That's what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, it's sort of your choice as well.
Exactly.
So I wouldn't hold it against anyone. So when I looked up super straight, first of all, and when I started reading about it, I actually thought it would make more sense if super straight meant you are attracted to trans women. Like, me as a straight male, if I was super straight, it would make more sense if I was attracted to everyone who identified as a woman, and that would be super straight,
Sure. Yeah,
But when we say super straight, it means people who are just attracted to the opposite gender who are also cis. So it's like opposite cisgender people.
Exactly. People that were born the gender that they identify as that.
Yeah, and I think if you're to come at this from like a reasonable position, and you were to say, look, having children is something that I want to do, and I want to be able to naturally have children with the partner that I eventually choose. I don't think that surely that isn't offensive. How can a trans person turn around and then say that's offensive if that's just something that you want, in your life?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a very important point, is actually the concept of giving birth. Just to go back to the beginning there, when I was talking about this video in particular, the point very much was that when this video was released, I agree with you, this was supposed to be inflammatory. This was to get a reaction out of the LGBT community, or at least vocal members in that community. That was very much the aim. But what actually ended up happening, was that because of the rise it got out of people, there ended up being people on the other side that actually says, I actually think super straight is valid. So as a result of this person making a joke video, we had all the people that were coming up with the backlash, and as a result of the backlash, we have people saying, actually, I think I agree with this. So out of the backlash that was initially first placed on this video, that's actually how this idea behind super straight actually kind of solidified, and that's where the real foundation of this movement came from. It's because now there's like this is how they got like the LGBTQ plus wiki page, and this is how they got like the flag. Like these things became legitimized, and all of a sudden more people in TikTok actually started identifying as this. So I totally agree with you. This person did this as a rise, and in some ways there's not much point discussing something that someone's just doing to troll effectively. But this now has a serious following, and that's kind of the more interesting part for me is the people that have came away and looked at this video and thought about it for a little bit and says, actually there is some precedence to this, and I think you're exactly right. There is nuance. Obviously, this is the wrong way to approach it. You don't fucking go away and say that I'm just not trans people because I'm getting hate for this. That's obviously wrong. But on the same time, I'm very much of the opinion, now that I've thought about it a bit, that people have the right to be attracted to anyone they want to for any reason. I don't think there needs to be any justification. I think, and when it comes to particularly trans relationships, there are a couple that are extremely obvious. Like, as you said, for instance, the whole concept of going through birth. These people oftentimes, like trans people, they'll have difficulties medically throughout their lives, you know, and they'll be going through surgeries, and these are things that people are like can perceive as burdens. So there are valid reasons why people would and wouldn't want to engage in that type of relationship. But at the end of the day, I don't think you can possibly approach this from any other angle that saying that super straight is bigotry or transphobic. How is that any different from forcing sexuality upon someone, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say, if you're talking to a reasonable person about being super straight and somebody who identifies as super straight, if you're talking to them and you're able to have a reasonable conversation about it, it doesn't come across as bigotry. You know, the way that I just described, you know, the way I felt about it, I don't think anyone would hear that and think he's a bigot.
Well, that's where you're wrong.
Well, so the thing about the TikTok being made, the guy's made the TikTok and he's aimed it at a specific group. Obviously, in my opinion, he's obviously aimed it at this group of very vocal activists about it. So he's aimed it at that group, and that group have sort of taken a stance and a viewpoint which I think the average person doesn't agree with. So he's made the video, they've responded with backlash. The average person's seen the video, and the average person probably knows what he's trying to do, but they also see the sort of foundation behind super straight, which is to say, you know, you can't force someone to go out with someone that is trans, and that's probably something that they think, you know. So the very vocal LGBTQ plus community that have came out with backlash for it, they've then alienated, you know, your average person who thinks this thing. They're not exactly in agreement with the guy that made the TikTok, and they're not condoning people making TikToks like this, but they are saying it's okay to be super straight, which this vocal community are saying, well, you're transphobic, and it's people are just kind of like acting back against that. So it kind of goes back to what we were talking about. I think it was last week when we spoke about like politics and how people sort of go to extremes. It's almost like what I was trying to explain last week, where that sort of like left wing hyper vocal LGBTQ plus community have said, or anyone that doesn't go out with a trans person, it's a transphobe, and like people who agree with the movement and people who like agree with equal rights are now starting to turn around and be like, hold on a second, that's not what we think, you know. So they've kind of, people are going more and more left wing towards this issue, and now that community has gone so extremely to the left wing that people are now starting to move back towards the centre. You know, they're inadvertently pushing people away that are actually on their side, that support them.
I see what you mean. Yeah, from my perspective, this basically what's happened here is that this is the first time that this question is actually being pushed into the limelight, because like, regardless of where the origins of this question came from, you know, as we know, it was a TikTok troll, like that's just by the by. Now and we
probably should sort of clarify that we do think this guy is a TikTok troll. He is a troll. That's what he's doing.
I think we've made that pretty clear. Yeah,
he's going for this reaction.
Yeah, and that's exactly what's achieved. But what I'm trying to say is that regardless of his intentions, it has put a question to the forefront of this type of community, and people are now actually saying for the first time, it's like we hadn't thought about that before. Is the concept of super straight, is that legitimate or not? And this is where a lot of the argument has come about. And from my perspective, I don't see how any reasonable person could ever argue against the idea of sexual preferences, because at the end of the day, the way I was going to think of this was that there's a distinct difference between discrimination and prejudice. You know, everyone has prejudices, everyone in their life. The fact that you're attracted to certain type of people as opposed to other type of people means that you're prejudiced. The fact that you don't go away and have sex with absolutely everyone that makes a move towards you means you have prejudice. I mean, some people may have less prejudice than other people in that regard, but at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with that. And just because your sexual preferences don't align with one particular group of people does not mean you're discriminating against them. The irony here is that like this, like for instance that wiki where there's hundreds upon hundreds of different types of sexualities, these are all inherently exclusive. They are all inherently exclusive to certain groups of people, right? But that's never been seen as a problem before. So why, in this instance, has it manifested in this way where the backlash has happened? And that's kind of like where the deeper part of this question I kind of want to address comes from here, is that why has this happened? Where does it come from? It's because actually, in order, I can give a little bit more background information as well, because this actually isn't the first time this question has been addressed. Actually, this is the first time that I've seen it really been addressed in terms of straight people, and that's where the whole super straight term came from. But actually, back in 2016 and 2017, there a group of lesbian activists basically came together and they started protesting for something known as the movement was known as Get the L Out, which I don't know if you'll have heard of. I had briefly heard of it, but I'd only researched it more recently. And basically it was a group of lesbians that were protesting the idea that how exactly to phrase it here. So they were protesting this concept which is known as the cotton ceiling. And this is obviously a play on words of the glass ceiling. And the cotton ceiling has been described as the barrier trans women face when denied sex with lesbian women. Which sounds wrong when you think about that for a bit longer. Like to imply that there is a barrier in order to have sex with a certain type of person that identifies as a lesbian. So what I'm basically trying to say here is that this argument we've had with like, should straight people be able to discriminate, this has already happened with the lesbian community, and this happened back in 2016 and 17, and they ended up protesting during the Great Britain Pride Walk of 2018. And these protesters were actually openly derided by the officials of the LGBTQ plus Great Britain representatives. They were called bigots because they were arguing for the fact they were arguing against this concept of the cotton ceiling. And by the way, the cotton ceiling, as much as a play on word for the glass ceiling, it's basically meant to represent the cotton underwear that lesbians wear, and like the barrier is trying to get through the underwear in order to have sex with these women. It's pretty fucked up actually when you think about it. So it seems to me that this is an argument that's happened before, you know, this in terms of whether this is discriminatory or not. And for me, I think that this seems to come down to the argument of whether a trans person is the same as a person born that gender at birth, right? That this is where the core of this kind of comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I find it quite bizarre that there are people in the world that think they can mandate upon you the people that you choose to have sex with.
I think it's inherently coercive and kind of rapey.
That's quite bizarre in the first instance, you know, because everyone makes that choice already, right?
Exactly.
You're already making the choice between people who you would have sex with and who you wouldn't have sex with. And when you talk about trans people, and if you say, well, people being trans, if you sort of divide them into those groups based on the fact they're trans, that makes you a transphobe. Mm-hmm. That seems bizarre to me, because the way that I see trans is just something different about someone. You know, it's just like it matters as much as me being ginger and you know, having dark hair, like, or you like, you know, want to at the moment, but you have your natural hair color. We have different natural hair colors, which makes us different. And someone being trans, that's about the same thing to me. When I'm thinking about different hair colors, and I'm thinking between someone's cis or someone's trans. Okay. That's about all that matters to me, if you know what I'm saying.
And going on from that, it's perfectly fine for someone not to be attracted to someone because they have blonde hair. You know, it's perfectly fine for someone not to be attracted to someone because they have ginger hair. Like that, these are not. You cannot be upset with someone for that.
It's sort of a decision that everyone's already consciously or subconsciously making already, and it's just. It just seems to be something, you know, inherent that's within you. You have this prejudice between people, and that's how you end up choosing who you will and who you won't, or who you want to and who you don't want to have sex with. You know, it's something that's happening all around us, and I don't think just because you're trans, that doesn't exclude you from that selection process, right?
No. Well, the way that because I've read a couple of different sources to try and understand what this concept of cotton sealing was. It's because obviously there's people that deride it, because obviously when you even think about it for a little moment, it sounds horrific. But there are people that have communicated that this basically, they think it has been miscommunicated over time, and they believe that it's a problem of lack of basically understanding. They want people. They believe that once lesbian people learned more about what it means to be trans, that they would realize that they are incorrect for being attracted the way they are. They generally, the way this is phrased is that what you're attracted to and not attracted to is wrong. You know, and this is why I find the whole movement is so. I actually find it quite repulsive, the idea of trying to enforce or coerce attraction to other people. But the question, the thing that is just more bizarre to me is that how does this happen? Like, why is this okay just for this particular group of people? We would never allow any other group of people to go around acting this way and imposing this on other people. And I think what I was trying to come on to was that it's because the whole act of implying that there is a difference and that you can be attracted to trans people and not trans people and vice versa, it has the inherent subtext that you believe there is a difference between, for instance, a woman and a trans woman.
Yeah.
And that's where the rub lies in for these people, is because there's a really, really strong vocal movement right now that are vehemently arguing that there is no discrimination between discrimination was the wrong word to use here. There's no differentiation between sex and gender. They believe that these two are one and the same. Another way of phrasing this is that sex is a social construct. These people that believe this, and this is why I think the inherent problem with categorizing trans people and non-trans people into different sexual categories is problematic for them, right?
Well, this is what I was talking about on the first week of the podcast when I said that we should maybe start thinking about how sex and gender are like different things.
Exactly.
So,
yes.
I think a good way to look at it would be to, for example, say if you were in you're just on the internet and you're just looking around, or you're in a classroom, and see if you were doing like a gender studies course and your lecturer just had like a picture on the board that was like the X-ray of a woman and an X-ray of a trans woman. Now you can quite confidently sit there and, if you know that one of them's a trans woman and you know that one of them is a biological woman who's been a woman since birth, you can look at them and you can see the differences in the way that you can see differences in any woman. That doesn't mean that you can't look at them and say they're both women, if that makes sense. So you can look at the X-ray will be different in the sense that one will have the typical male organs inside them, the typical like the prostate and stuff like that, and the other one, who's a biological woman born like that since birth, will have the female like sex organs and stuff like that. Now, if the one with the sort of male organs identifies as trans, you can still call that person a woman. You can do that, but you can also acknowledge the fact that there are differences between these two women.
Sure.
So you can look at the two of them, and as much as you would look at, like, if you had a picture of two women, one was a redhead, one was a blonde, you'd be like, these two women are different. You could also look at a trans woman and a woman and be like, these two are different. They're both women. There's no part of me that says they're any less women than each other, but they are different. There is a difference here, and that's something that we should highlight. There is a difference between a trans woman and a woman. That doesn't mean that any of them are any more or any less a woman than the other, but they are different.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that really sums it up quite well. It's from the little bit of reading I've done, basically, it comes into this is where the whole theory of research and thinking, not so much research to be honest, of is what's known as being gender critical or gender critical thinker, and it basically is the study of how sex plays a role in determining gender. So there's one field of belief where basically people believe that your natural born sex plays absolutely no role in your sexual attraction and your gender, and then there's the other people, these gender critical thinkers, that believe that there is a role that's played there. And what I seem to understand is that right now the unfortunate truth of the matter is, as much as there's obvious things like you've just stated, like there are obvious physiological differences. There are things that these are almost there's, I mean, it's so obvious. It's ridiculous that we're having this argument in the first place, But at the end of the day, we are having that argument. But there's also more subtle issues. For instance, like what you mentioned in the first week, the whole concept of people, maybe women, feeling uncomfortable with a man being able to self-classify themselves as a woman and being allowed access to women safe spaces like locker rooms, hotels, prisons, that type of thing. That's a really important issue, and it needs to be researched. We need to understand the actual role that sex plays in terms of how these interactions play out, how these sociological interactions play out. And from what I'm seeing is the problem is that we simply are not allowed to do that right now, because any field of research in which seriously probes the complex interactions between sex and gender is automatically labelled as either sexist or bigotry
hate
or
of some
transphobic
sort, yeah.
or hate of some type. Yeah, but there's questions that need to be asked here. There's a discussion that needs to be had, because these aren't complex. Like, for instance, the whole concept that we just mentioned there of women feeling uncomfortable. Apparently, after a little bit of light reading that I just did, since the introduction of that law, there's been absolutely no empirical evidence that there has been an increase in either assaults or incidences that are caused as a result of males classifying themselves as a female, self-declaring themselves as a female, and then causing problems in these protected spaces, apparently. But the problem is that discussion isn't allowed to even be had. We've got this discussion on the table, and the problem is that one side believes there's no discussion to be had. They believe that this is a closed book already, and the fact that gender and sex are completely differentiated. And that I like to believe that if we were able to do more research, we would have answers to these questions, and then people would be better educated, and then we would maybe not have the reactions we see. But the very problem we're encountering is that the reactions people are having is stopping research from happening. It's almost like
there's a
one of
mixture.
those loops.
There's a mixture of, I think, because there are a lot of like trolls and there are a lot of haters out there.
Mm-hmm.
The people, these vocal advocates for the LGBTQ plus community, people that are fighting back against like the guy on TikTok and stuff like that, they're not just seeing people that are being critical. They're probably seeing an awful lot of people just being trolls, of people just being bigots.
I guess
so.
Mm-hmm.
They're just, and there's probably like so much of it, and it would be wrong of them to do this, but they're probably just grouping it all in as one. They're probably just like so used to hearing it at this point that if anyone does try to be critical, they probably just don't have the time for it. So
sure,
it's a case of there are extremes on the other side as well that are damaging the cause. And I'm always saying this: if two reasonable people sit down and have a discussion on something, you'll often find that they'll come to a compromise that they can mostly agree on. They can be like, well, if you think that and I think this, maybe this is what we should do. The problem is we have like trolls on one side, we have people that are like extremists on the other side, and these are the people that are like vocally arguing, and there's no real space, especially on social media, for the reasonable centre to come in and say something. The only time the reasonable centre ever says something is when one of the sides goes too far.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It's like I believe that we can have discussions on stage, and these people can discuss things and come to a conclusion. You can have someone that's someone like J.K. Rowling, who's a trans exclusionary radical feminist, who's basically someone that believes in critical gender theory, and you can have someone that's in the complete opposite at the end, like someone that is an LGBTQ plus like third generation new wave advocate that believes that sex is a social construct. And I believe that these people could have a conversation. The problem is the crowd. The problem is that the crowd would not allow that to happen, right?
Well, you said that there about J.K. Rowling being, I think she's been sort of like posted as like a TERF online, but I don't think that she like identifies with that like label. She doesn't like, I'm not sure that she like explicitly like labels herself as a TERF, does she? Have you seen something along those lines?
I thought that was relatively like the term TERF is only become derogatory recently. Nothing in the actual distinction of what a TERF is negative towards trans people. TERFs are basically from what I understand, feminists that believe in gender critical theory, so people that believe that there should be a bit more thought and delicate handling of how we dissociate gender and sex. Maybe you're right. Maybe she doesn't. Maybe she doesn't actually use the TERF phrase in order to refer to herself. But what the TERF movement is aligns with her beliefs.
Yeah, when you've said it like that, I think that the name TERF, when you say like trans exclusionary, that leads me to believe that they would be bigoted. Like that,
right?
The name
okay.
on itself leads me to believe they would be bigoted. And I remember J.K. Rowling put out like a statement in December, or maybe it was November or something like that last year, which actually kind of ties in nicely to my topic next week. I kind of want to talk about that a little bit next week.
Excellent.
But she put out a statement that basically sort of like explained her position, and she got kind of hounded for being like a transphobe and stuff like that online. She got a lot of backlash for it. But then I did a bit of digging. I read the article myself and I kind of went through it. And at one point in the article, she actually explicitly says, of course, trans rights matter and of course, trans lives matter. And she goes on a little bit to talk about how a lot of trans people get into quite a lot of domestic abuse, violence issues.
Yeah, and she's been in that position herself.
And she's trying to like help them as well. And then I did a little bit more digging on it, and I seen the places that were reporting on her statement weren't quoting her, and they weren't linking to her article. So there were a lot.
They were describing it.
Yeah, there were a lot of like news articles and quote unquote journalism.
Exactly.
That was going out their way to say that she was a transphobe and that she was a TERF, but they weren't showing you pictures of what she said or quoting her words or even linking to the article. And I'm like, you're just trying to tell me what's up here. You're not letting me like decide what's up by giving me the facts. So I don't know if J.K. Rowling is, I don't know if she self-describes herself as a TERF, but what you're saying is correct. I think she is a gender critical thinker. I don't know to the extent of what she's done, what research she's done, but the statement that she put out seemed to highlight that she had done some research, and I didn't personally find anything transphobic in the statement that she put out.
No, yeah, I'm actually more or less the exact same boat as you. I found about this statement that J.K. Rowling put out on Reddit at the time, and I went to the comment section, and I'd never heard what a TERF was before. It was basically a bunch of comments talking like how like these TERFs were like the devil incarnate, and how they're all bigots and how they're all transphobes and stuff like that. And then I actually went to research what a TERF was on my own, and I did not seem to consolidate how these were the same. How these were the same viewpoint. Actually, as an aside, in terms of J.K. Rowling, again, she actually has made a statement since releasing that initial statement, and she's basically said that she cannot fathom how someone that's been an advocate for trans rights for 35 years is now being called a bigot. She's someone that's been so progressive on this issue, and now she is now just being demonized by the media sources and these things, like you say. So it's one of those difficult ones where I just feel that it's so hard for just any type of dialogue to be formed right now, to exist. We've got someone that was as loved as J.K. Rowling, and she is being demonized for her, from what you and I both seem to believe are relatively reasonable views. I can't say that she's right. I cannot say that. I've not seen the data to back up her views, but I can't say she's wrong. I have no reason to think she's wrong on the flip side of that either.
No, it just seems to be she's come at it from a point of critical thinking, and the fact that she's even thought about it for some reason, it merits backlash. It seems from these people, but I think what I was talking about last week was this elastic band effect. I think we're seeing this happen more and more. Like every time this happens now, more and more people kind of stand up for something that they believe in. So it's like the reasonable centre that are fighting back against either the extreme left or the extreme right. Every time something like this happens, and like you're saying, I haven't heard about this super straight thing, but from what you're describing, it seems like more people have stood up for this than ever before. Like when J.K. Rowling said this, I think there was a bit of fight back, and there are a lot of people that were like, we're not going to abandon Harry Potter and stuff like that. We're not going to like do these things.
Sure.
But it seems, from my point of view, and that's just basically what I see on Twitter, to be honest. And most of the people that I see on Twitter are, I would say, fairly left wing when it comes to this kind of stuff. Fairly progressive to the point of
Okay.
like not thinking about it as well.
Mhm.
I'm seeing a lot of like people that are sort of like fighting back against this sort of like almost like exclusion of thought, I guess I
Yeah.
would describe it as.
Yeah, I agree. Just from what I've seen as well, it kind of reinforces this because, as I said, the first iteration that I've saw of this subject being broached was just limited to the lesbian community, and then more prominent figures, for instance, like J.K. Rowling has discussed this openly, and now we're having the conversation where we're looking at this much larger audience is thinking about this, and just the whole act of doing a little bit of basically what we're talking about, critical thinking, has got to be super important. I do hope that you are correct in the fact that people are becoming more aware of it. I think what we've
I
been
think they are.
observing backs it up. I think so as well. I think what we're seeing is the slow movement away from the extreme nature of what we're talking about. The next stage happens. The next stage needs for this sort of research to then be accepted as actual research. That we need to move past the state we have in the academic climate, and this is probably something I want to talk about in a future video as well. We need to move past the stage in the academic climate where certain subjects are, like you've just said, they're just untouchable. They're broached. We're training people not to think in a certain way as if it will make the issue go away, and more people are realizing that no, the issues aren't going away. They're actually being made worse by not discussing it.
Yeah,
So,
and the thing when you were talking about, first of all, it's a bit different. The lesbian, the cotton sealing movement you're talking about there. I understand that one a little bit less because obviously, if you're a lesbian, you're already attracted to someone who can't give you a child anyway. So it makes a little bit less sense for me in that regard. But that still doesn't mean
Sure.
that I think you should be able to impose that like on someone, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. Exactly. At the end of the day, that was the perspective I was coming from. Like, everyone will have their own reasons. Like, you've got like the like, I know this is the very end of it, but one of the main points you have was about children. At the end of the day, everyone has genitalia, and you will be attracted to a certain type over the other type, and not everyone that's trans will go for surgery, and there's nothing wrong with someone not being attracted to a certain type of genitalia. There's not wrong with someone. There's not someone with someone wanting that to be a legit from day one vagina.
Yeah,
that's fine.
This is what kind of leads me to believe that a lot of this stuff is kind of like just smoke and mirrors for like real issues that are going on, because I don't think that you and I we've met trans people and we've had like conversations with them. I know your girlfriend has got a friend that's trans, and we've met them, and he's come to parties and stuff like that, and obviously we treated him no different than we would treat literally anybody else. I would see myself as a reasonable person. I would see him as a reasonable person, and we're never going to have this conversation. He's not sitting there telling me that people who are born as women, identify as women, should be attracted to him. You know what I mean? Like,
No,
I don't even
happen,
think
yeah.
the reasonable trans people and people who aren't just saying that you're a transphobe for doing these things, like reasonable people aren't asking you to do these things.
No. I don't even think that it's like when we've been having this discussion, I'm trying to make sure that this isn't trans people that have this view. This is the online LGBTQ plus hive mind. The community, the main thought process that people are being encouraged to have, coming as a third wave LGBTQ plus generation. That's what I was looking for. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think, and I would find it hard to believe that these people are representing the view of that group, and to even think that they are representing that view, I think is sort of quite narrow-minded and quite naive. I don't even know, like, if a trans person was, so say if someone was a trans man and they were attracted to females, and if that female was to then say, oh well, I don't want to, like, I'm not attracted to you, like I don't see you that way, would that trans person then be like, oh, you shouldn't think that because I'm a real man and stuff like that? Like, I don't see a person like doing that.
This is what we seem to see seems to purely be a result of group thought. You know, I don't believe there's any individual person that would form these thoughts on their own. This is just purely what happens when a huge amount of people get together and these hive minds are allowed to echo and reverberate and construct back on each other. These are the type of dangerous thoughts that end up coming out as a result of them. I've never met anyone that felt so entitled that they think they should have a say over who you should be attracted over, but for some reason this is a relatively vocal movement online, you know, and we can only presume and hope that this represents so few people, but it still does make you wonder how the hell did we get here?
It also seems strange to me that they they don't want questions, they don't want anything someone's thinking otherwise, because, you know, for all they know, the research that we're advocating for could support their beliefs.
Exactly,
you know,
that's the thing. Yeah. There are questions that have not been answered and not been allowed to be answered, and they could have answers that surprise us. You know, it's like you said in week one. It could be that maybe we need to think about how sex and gender are related to each other, or maybe we need to come up with entirely new meanings to these phrases. Maybe the whole idea of sex and gender, maybe that's all outdated. You know, maybe we need to just move all past that. But at the end of the day, we're stuck with what we are because we're not allowed to think on a really truly open field about these issues.
Yeah, and like what you're saying, when it comes to like the issue that I brought up was sort of males that were self-classifying and going into like bathrooms and stuff like that. Like you're saying, that the research might suggest that in fact when we allow people to do that, the crime rate doesn't increase. You know, it might say that, you know, but we don't know. And if we're not allowed to critically think about it, we never will know. We'll just have to accept what people are telling us is right, which I think the average person, the normal, reasonable person, doesn't agree with. You know, they don't. Normal, reasonable people don't agree with extremists, which I think these people are. And to sum up, I think the guy that's posted this TikTok is a troll. But what he's trolling about is sort of grounded in the average person's thoughts. So in a way, it's a very, very clever TikTok because he's picked a topic that people actually generally agree with.
Yeah.
But he's framed it in such a way that it would merit so much backlash.
And reaction.
So you can see it's actually quite a genius TikTok, to be honest. If we look at it strictly from the point of gaining traction online, it's quite genius.
Well, actually, I think it's really hasn't worked out for him because I think his mother's business was more or less shut down because people were attacking the business, leaving fake reviews and death threats and stuff. But I mean, in terms of views and nothing more,
what are we going to do with the internet? I guess.
Classic internet. So I mean, at the end of the day, the views have probably been great before the channel was shut down.
I should have known before I said it was genius that he would have got death threats. I should have known.
As another mention as well, on every platform, the hashtag super straight is now completely banned. So you cannot find it on any social media platform anymore.
Yeah, I think such a negative reaction from the first instance. If it had been brought up in maybe a way that was more respectful, maybe it wouldn't have been banned. But the way it's been brought up has just been like, nah, get that the fuck out of here.
It's put it in a bad light from day one, and has not. There was no. This guy didn't post this video. It's like, please post your thoughts in the comments below. There was none of that.
No, yeah. So I think we've kind of come to a fairly reasonable conclusion that it's not your right, or you don't have the ability to impose what someone is sexually attracted to upon them. That's not something that you have control over. That's not something you can tell someone. But I think there's probably a reasonable discussion to be had somewhere amongst that. I think maybe we just had a snippet of.
Yeah. That was basically what was so fascinating about the subject and why I wanted to talk to you about it. Is because it presents you with a question which is pretty obvious on the face of it. This is not a reasonable way to act to someone that talks about their sexuality, and there's a little bit more to talk about. There's a little bit more in terms of where we currently are with understanding these concepts like sex and gender, and it basically allows us to kind of open the door to this conversation. And the main takeaway that we've had was basically what we've had in weeks past, which was these things need to be discussed, and you, me, Scott and Lewis, we are the pioneers of that, bringing a brighter future to everyone YouTube,
yes, of course. Yeah,
iTunes, and Spotify.
All 19 of these viewers have now been enlightened in ways they couldn't possibly have been before.
Woke. They thought they were woke before.
Yeah, I think it's a very good issue in terms of we can see all the backlash on the internet as a very surface level discussion that's just going on, where it's just two people that are shouting on the tip of an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is like all they can see.
Right.
And if they just like dive a little bit deeper, there's like so much more to discuss here. There's so much more nuance. There's so much more information. There's so much more detail we can be discussing, and there's actually a huge issue here. But all they're interested about is sort of screaming at each other from the top of this very like small structure, and it's bizarre, to be honest.
Yeah, truly bizarre, but pretty damn interesting.
Yeah, and another good one. I think that we're kind of talking about like LGBTQ plus movements and stuff like that, which leads quite nicely onto my topic, which is another movement that has been going on in the past, just over the past year or so. So what I want to give a bit of background first. What I want to talk about today is, or has been, the Black Lives Matter movement over the last year. How that's kind of been adopted by a lot of large sort of like companies, bodies, governments and stuff like that. And I want to talk about how they're reacting to it and if they even care. Because something happened recently, just last week actually, that has made me sort of like, I've kind of been thinking for a while that all the messaging is a bit of a farce, but something's happened in the last week that I've thought, yeah, you guys really don't give a fuck about this stuff, and you just want people to think about it. And I realise I'm coming into this quite hot-headed and quite angry, and it's because I am quite angry about it. Quite frankly, I'm actually furious about what's happened, about the incident that occurred last week, and it's so. I think it's so obviously racist, and I honestly think that if people don't condemn it as racist, like I'm almost like stretching to say you're part of the problem. So it may be the same case in the first week where like you came at Star Trek quite hot and we kind of talked down a little bit. It could be the same case this week, but we'll find out anyway. So over the last year, we've seen this Black Lives Matter movement kind of gain a lot of traction, and it first came about because of the murder of the guy in America, George Floyd, I think his name was.
That's right, yeah.
Where the policeman sort of knelt on his neck for like an extremely
horrific,
extremely long period of time, and there, we've seen the videos and stuff like that. I think everyone pretty much knows what happened. So it was basically police brutality on a racist level. So then eventually this guy died, and it led to a lot of these protests that went on in America, and there's basically been a lot of like messaging throughout the world really. Now, I watch quite a bit of football, or I have been watching quite a lot of football in the last year because of COVID, because of lockdown, stuff like that. I've kind of got back into football a little bit, and I've been watching a lot of the Scottish Premier League and a lot of the English Premier League, and in that there's a lot of messaging and a lot of sort of media attention being brought towards it. So, for example, at the start of the games, players have been taking a knee, and they've been sort of putting their fist up to show solidarity to people, to black people, basically. There's been a lot of messaging on the television broadcast. So, like when the match kind of starts and ends, there's like a big Black Lives Matter banner and stuff like that. They're kind of going out their way to show their support as much as they possibly can. Now, when it comes to these teams and stuff like that, it's never been a concern in my head that these teams are racist because, well, although outside of isolated incidents, I turn on these games and there's 22 players on the pitch, and 10 of them, 12 of them could be black.
Sure.
And it's like, and some games are even like overrepresented in terms of the general populace, and it doesn't have anything to do with a race. It's because they're the best players that the team has at the time. That's it's literally surface level as it goes. These people are the best players, and they will make us the most money. So, from that stance, I've never seen any sort of racism. And when they're taking the knee and stuff like that, you can see there's like a dozen black players on the pitch, and they're all joining in. The white people are playing next to them. The Asian people, whoever's on, are all taking this knee, and there's been a lot of like messaging towards it. But it's been going on for like a long time now, and I haven't really heard anything being done other than the messaging. So it's like, but they're still doing it, and I'm starting to wonder if it's all just like for show.
Yeah.
If they're just kind of doing this to make it look like they're doing stuff. And something happened last week that made me think that particularly. So I support Rangers Football Club, and they were just in a European competition called the Europa League, which is like the second tier European football tournament. There's like a Champions League, which is for the top tier teams, and then teams that are just below them get put into the Europa League, and this is the league that Rangers were playing in.
Okay, thank you for explaining that to me.
Yeah, so Rangers got through to the knockout stage, which is like the final stage of the tournament, and they got to, I think it was the last 16 teams in the tournament, and they played the team Slavia Prague. Now they drew one each in the first leg, and then they came home to Glasgow in the second leg, and they ended up getting beat 2-0, and they got put out. But during the game, there was an incident between a couple of players, and I'm just going to play it now. I've got it up on YouTube right now. The video is a little bit. It's not the best, and the reason the video isn't the best is because BT Sport have cut the incident out of the highlights of the game. So.
Right.
First red flag, straight up into the air. It's been cut from the highlights of the game. So if we want to think about how racism is being brushed under the carpet, maybe we can start thinking about it now. So I'll just play it just now. So we have a player kind of moves over from Slavia Prague, kind of moves over to one of the Rangers players, a black player. He covers his mouth and he whispers something into his ear. The player immediately has a reaction and he starts pointing towards him, shouting racist, and then a bit of chaos sort of ensues. You can see it there. The player goes over, he covers his mouth and he whispers something into his ear. The black player has an immediate reaction and he starts pointing towards him and starts shouting racist. And a chaos sort of ensues as the teams go back and forth towards each other. But I just play the video again, just from the start, just to show you now that I've described it. So the player is standing there. He moves past a bunch of players to get to this player, covers his mouth, whispers something in his ear, and the player has an immediate reaction towards him. So that was how that transpired. And so the game continued on. It was a bust up for about maybe 5 minutes or so. A couple of players got booked in the end, which means basically cautioned.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the game continued. The game still had about 20 minutes to go, I think it was. And the game continued. The game then finished, and at the end of the game, there was another bust up on the pitch, and apparently one of the players was like he was hit in the tunnel or something like that. Which is, we'll talk about that later on.
Okay.
So anyway, after the game came out, I stayed to watch the interviews after the game because I wanted to see, and specifically I wanted to know what he'd said. Because that's what you have to know in this stage. We have to. It has to come out like, what has he said? Tell us what he said, and we can just see if it's racist or not. All right. So we got to the end of the game. Obviously, the game continued, and we didn't know until the end. I sat after the game, and they were like, "Oh, there's going to be an interview with the manager." So I was like, "Brilliant! He'll know what he said. He'll come out and he'll say it." The post show came and went, half an hour. One interview was conducted. One interview with a white player who wasn't even on the pitch at the time, who was asked what he said, and the guy said, "I don't know, I haven't been told yet." Which, first of all, is fucking bullshit, because the moment they came off that pitch, probably after the incident, every Rangers player knew what he said. Every single one of them. So that player's been told not to say it on the post-match interview. It's flat out a lie. So the post-game show came and went. There was no interview with the captain, who normally gets interviewed after these games, and who was really involved in the incident. He got no interview. The manager normally gets interviewed. He didn't get interviewed. So the post
cover up, clearly.
Yeah.
Right.
So the post show came and went, and I had to then watch the highlights of the entire day's football to see an interview with the manager. So I think it was about an hour and a half after the game had finished before any interview was even aired about the incident.
Right.
And basically the manager came out and he said that one of our players has been racially abused, and that he is issuing his full support in sort of defending him and in chasing this up and in trying to get an investigation going. He was explicitly asked what the player said, and he said, "I wouldn't like to repeat it."
Okay.
So basically, it's been almost a week now we don't know. We don't know what the player said. We have absolutely no idea. However, the Slavia Prague have issued a statement on it, which is here right now. So the first part of the statement says, Slavia resolutely denies the disgusting accusation of one of the team captains, Outrage Kudela, which is the player who supposedly said it, of racist behaviour. After one of the brutal fouls, Kudela spoke to one of the Rangers players and was quoted in the statement, "I absolutely deny there was anything racist in these words." He then goes on to say, after the end of the game, the team was not allowed to enter the dressing room. Andrzej Kudela was assaulted by player Kamara and hit with fists in the head, with manager Steven Gerrard witnessing the incident. Even the UEFA representatives who were also present on the site of the incident were shocked by this behaviour. The team is now safe, accompanied by the Scottish police. So that was the statement that they came out with after the game, sort of unequivocally denying it.
Sure.
So let's get your initial thoughts on this. First of all, do you think there is sufficient evidence of racial abuse here? Is the video evidence that I've showed you, is that enough?
To me, it seems blindingly obvious that there was some type of slur dropped during that game. And to be honest, like, from when I watched the clip, like, I did not get the at least the commentators did not give the impression that player that broke out into the rage that we saw, that was typical behaviour, you know. Which, to me, who has no idea who any of these players are, it seems like a slur was dropped on the field. And to be honest with you, the cover up that we are seeing, if that was the case, that if there was some sort of language used, almost reinforces that to me.
That's almost the final nail in the coffin for me. Where it's like, if what he said wasn't racist, then why don't you just tell us what he said then?
Right. Yeah. But it's all like I'm curious to see where we go with this further from here. But I would like to mention another event, because I don't know a bloody thing about football. I watch football, but recently I was watching a documentary which was basically talking about some of the issues of race in the UK, and it was talking about specifically multiculturalism in the UK football, and basically it's talking about how there is an incredible amount of multiculturalism, and as you said, it's just because these people that come from all over the world, they're the best players, so you end up with teams that unsurprisingly aren't all from Scotland. It's because we don't have the population and we don't have the training facilities to generate the best players, so that's kind of obvious. But it was they were particularly talking to a football player who was called Les Ferdinand, which you can confirm to me that you had heard of, and basically an event really, really similar to what you just showed me played out on the pitch. I can't remember who it was. Someone Terry. John Terry said something to him, and they never told you what the phrase was, but unfortunately in this clip, you could clearly see his mouth. So basically the lip readers from across the country could see him, name him, "You fucking black, CUNT." Like that was what he clearly said. So it was a lot more definitive in that case. But from my understanding, it was not unlike what you're discussing right now. Like, this was not career ending for this Terry person. This was not the end of the world.
It was by no means career ending for him.
Right. Exactly. Like this, and this was something that was bad, and it had like the media covered it for a day or two because people were talking about it, but it was passed over. And just as an aside, by the way, as well, before we get back onto talking about this issue, the Les Ferdinand, he was asked how many times in his career he's actually been offered a role as a coach. I think that's the word. It was like a team coach or something like that throughout his career, and he basically said that throughout his entire career he's only ever been offered once, and it was by a team owner that was also black, which I thought was pretty telling in terms of just the way that the UK football is quite not multicultural, you know.
Yeah. So I mean, that incident is horrific. Like it it kind of stands out as an incident that didn't get much attention because much attention wasn't being drawn to it at the time, which is obviously wrong. I quite personally believe that if these players are caught saying racial slurs or being derogatory towards people of other race, no matter what it is, whether it's black or any other race, that should be a career ender. I think personally that's what I believe. So when John Terry said that, when he said black cunt, his career should have been done. Should have been finished.
It should have at least been asked. You need to resign from the team. You cannot. We don't want you representing us anymore.
Exactly. So to bring it back to this one's a little bit. This one's a little bit different because we didn't actually see what he said. There was no way to lip read because he did cover his mouth when he did it. But I don't think that we actually need that evidence to declare this as racial abuse. No. And I think there are other forms of evidence that damn this as an open and shut case, to be honest. So I just want to go through the points that I think make it evident that this guy has done something sort of racially motivated. So first of all, he's been on the other side of a huddle when this has happened, right? He moves over towards this player, like he moves past several players to get to this player, and first of all, he covers his mouth when he goes to speak to him. Now that straight away tells you that it's something that he shouldn't be saying. Whatever it is, he shouldn't be saying. He does not want
people to see this.
Yeah, he does not want people to hear or to see it. Now, second of all, he walks past a bunch of other players to say this. But the one thing to note about all the other players that he walks past, they are all either in communication with someone else or they're on his own team. So he moves past a bunch of other players to get to someone who is standing on his own so that he can say something. So if you see from the video, there was another black player standing next to the Rangers player. Yeah. So Rangers had two black players right next to each other.
Yeah.
He moves past the first one because the first one is already engaged in a conversation with one of his other teammates.
Right.
He moves past the two of them and goes round to the second black player. He then covers his mouth and whispers something. So he's not only just saying this to a Rangers player.
No.
He's saying this to a specific Rangers player who is out of earshot of anybody else.
Right. Okay.
So there's another strike. The player that he walks up to is black. Third of all, he doesn't walk up to a white guy. He walks specifically up to a black player. Now he does walk past another black player to get to him, but like I've said, he was in earshot of somebody else standing next to him. And then the final thing for me is that as soon as he is finished saying it, the black player then has reason to believe that what he said is racist. Now, see, even if the player said something, he commented on the fact he was black, or commented on someone's race, and it wasn't even derogatory,
that's still
I don't think that even
necessary.
matters.
No,
because there's no reason to bring that up. He's walked over to him, he's covered his mouth, saying something he shouldn't be, and he said something that can be connected to race. I think all of those points immediately, I think that is damning evidence. I personally believe that is conclusive evidence that he has said something racially charged, and quite frankly, his career should be over. Or at the very least, I mean, the team Slavia Prague, they can take whatever stance they want, obviously, because they're a private entity, they can do whatever they want. But the team are playing in the Europa League, and the Europa League has large messaging, sort of obvious messaging against this.
Right.
And at the very, very least, he should be told, you are never playing in Europe ever again. Like, your European football career, it's over. We don't want to be represented with this kind of stuff. The behaviour that you've just shown in the field is completely unacceptable, and you are never welcome back here ever again.
Yeah, like stand up for the messaging that you have been continuously preaching for the last year or so, solid now. Yeah,
and then I think that the evidence that we've just discussed alone is enough to condemn him for this. But then on top of that, we have this cover-up after the game. There's a lack of interviews immediately following because players are obviously being told what they can and cannot say to the cameras. And obviously, in my opinion, it seems to me like they're being taken through their contracts at the moment, and they're like, if you say something to the media right now, you're fired. Like, this is a breach of your contract, and we'll take you for everything you've got, or something along those lines.
They were on the phone with lawyers after that. That was like NDAs and stuff were being discussed literally after that game. Yeah,
so some element of it is being hushed up. And for a player to come out in the interview and to say, I don't know what he said, 10 minutes after the game, it's like, that's just a blatant lie. Like, we all know that you know what he said. That would have been your first prerogative after the game, to go speak to someone and be like, what did he just say? You know?
Yeah.
Following that, there was no interviews from the player that was involved. There was no interview from the captain, which is fairly regular after these games. There was no interview with the manager, which is every game.
Right. Yeah.
And then it took a whole hour after that to then even get the manager in front of a camera. Like, and then at that point, he's not even allowed to say what the guy said. He can only say that he supports the black player. Like,
yeah.
I don't know how more obvious it can be that this incident was racially charged. I don't know, without explicitly knowing what he said, which I don't even think is necessary here. It's so obvious that this has been some sort of racial abuse, and as far as I know, nothing has been done.
No, yeah, part of me understands the response that the team had in terms of, like, it seems clearly like vetting all their players and stuff like that. Is because I'm sure that, see, whenever something like this charged, this controversial happens, immediately the financial people in the team, they start thinking about risk mitigation. That's the most important thing for them, is how we can avoid losing either popularity or like seats or money or revenue, or like, I think probably a huge part of it is ads, how we can keep advertisers on our side. And unfortunately, I would think that the safest thing they can possibly do is just say something happened and then try and minimize coverage of it, because see, if it was to ever come out that this type of behavior happened within the team, or if it was to ever come out that the player that this was said to felt that not enough was done about it, or felt that his team was letting him down, or his manager was letting him down, that could be the next advertiser that would just like say, okay, we can no longer represent you, because they also have their risk managers that are saying that, oh, we currently advertise our product with that football team, and it comes out, it's turned out that the team is racist, or they've been doing something related to race, so they need to pull their ads. So there's just this chain of people mitigating the damage that can get done after something that this charged happens, and race is one of those things that's just super, super emotional for people, right?
I understand what you're saying, that a team would want to mitigate the risks involved with this, and there probably would be money fallout after it, inevitably.
There would be, I think a lot, yeah.
That there would definitely be that. But I just don't care.
No, at the end of the day, it's extremely hypocritical, in the highest regard.
I've got no sympathy for them whatsoever. I couldn't care less. And I think there has to be a bit of responsibility on not only... So there first of all has to be responsibility from the team who the player belongs to. The player's obviously done this. Mm-hmm. They should have, cut ties to him, being like, this behaviour isn't acceptable for us, which they haven't done. They've obviously backed their player, which I guess is a money thing. Maybe it's a money thing. And it's obviously he's a good player to be in the team, so they want to keep him as well. They don't want to do that because it'll make them worse.
Yeah, they've spent money getting him on the team in the first place. They want their money back from it.
Yeah, exactly, which I think is immoral, and quite frankly, I've no sympathy for that either. It's horrific is what it is. Secondly, there's a responsibility of UEFA, which is the body that governs these European tournaments, to stamp this out, to be like, you have to condemn this, and if you don't condemn this, like, first of all, your player's never playing in Europe ever again.
Yeah.
Let's get that straight off the bat. Your team has to condemn this, or you're never playing in Europe ever again. I don't feel like I'm being too extreme on this issue. I feel like they're talking about stamping racism out of football. They're talking about football's for everyone. All the messaging they've had for the past year means literally nothing if they're not doing anything about this incident. And then I actually think there's some responsibility on the Rangers players at this point, because nothing has happened so far. Once nothing has happened, I think a Rangers player should then come out, just take it and just come out and just say what he said. Literally just get in front of a camera and just say it. And I think it would probably be better. It would probably be better from a white guy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess so. In terms of optics, I guess. Uh-huh.
I don't even mean for like the teams, like for how they're perceived. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would be better, because if a black guy came out and said what he said, it'd be like, well, you're supporting, you know, your race. It's sort of like almost like you feel like you need to do that.
Yeah.
But if a white guy was to come out and say it, it would almost be like a statement from Rangers Football Club to be like, we could not give a fuck how many rules we're breaking here, and we're gonna show someone who's like a white guy showing solidarity for someone who's a different race. We're gonna make a statement as a club. Now, admittedly, I feel like Rangers have the least responsibility in all this, because they're the sort of like third chain in command. They're
the victims.
Yeah, exactly. It should be the team that did it, UEFA, and then Rangers, but all three have failed. And it doesn't make me proud to be a Rangers Football Club supporter when they came out after the game and one of the players blatantly lies that he doesn't know what the guy said, because he obviously does.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think the worst part is just the hypocrisy here. You know, as I said, I have an understanding of why they do it, but it's the fact that they spread this bullshit message continuously, and like they act as if they're all on the same page. They're all in this together, and it's all about the individual. And then these sort of things that they're unveiled, and it's so to me, it just seems so obvious that they're only driven financially. Like, this is all just to do with minimizing the amount of possible losses that each player in this can make, each individual player. So for instance, like, even like, see the team that Croatia, I can't remember what team was it again?
Slavia Prague.
Where Croatia came from there. Slavia
You're
Prague.
You're fucking racist, Lewis, you know that?
Yeah, all those Eastern Bloc guys, just group them up. So like, I understand they either had to completely denounce the player or deny that anything happened. It's because they could never have said, yeah, he said something racist, but we're not too worried about that. You know, like, they could not have taken middle ground. They had to be either really hardline or complete denial. So I understand why they've went the denial method. It's because from imagine you're like you're the chief financial officer of this team, because these teams are companies at the end of the day. You know, as much as it's like the football is the entertainment, they are designed to make money, and they're owned by someone, and they have shareholders and stockholders, right? At the end of the day, I assume. So imagine you're like a chief financial officer, and something's just come about, and you've had this controversy, and like you see it's the player that you've just spent I don't know how many millions, I don't know, a couple £1 million on, you know, and the contract's going to be another 4 years or something, and you see that you have to make this decision. See the manager that's in charge of the finances, they don't care about the PR. That's a different department. You know, that's so removed from the decisions that they're making. It's like, no, okay, call the lawyers in, think we can recuperate some of this. So it's to me, when I hear about this type of thing, it's this like the inevitable cynicism of corporations, right? Like, I can't help but associate this with just like the cold, calculated way people and middle managers are trained to deal with these issues, and how they lose sight of the human aspect of what's actually happened here. Yeah,
and it's despicable. I just want to make that totally clear. I think it's absolutely despicable.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it'll probably go to an investigation in UEFA, and I would be willing to bet a lot of money that UEFA will come to the conclusion that we cannot prove what he said, and that's will be the outcome.
Yeah.
It might not even be that bad for this team, because I've seen a lot of like stuff on social media of like supporters of this club like actually supporting the racism. Like there's messaging on like social media, like threads and stuff like that, of people that are sending emojis of like monkeys and stuff like that.
Oh,
and, like,
fuck yeah!
You know, like just. So it seems like there's like a lot of support. I don't know what it's like in Czech Republic. I've only been there like once, and I went on like a 2-day holiday. And so I don't know what it's like over there. They might not, as a club in their own country, they might not face a lot of backlash for this, because they might not give a shit, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's like, that's on them at that point, where it's like, your country doesn't care about racism. Like,
yeah, it's obviously, I agree with you. I imagine that's culturally an extremely different thing, to particularly in the UK. I think in the UK, compared to a lot of very Eastern Bloc countries, have quite strong stances, which is even worse when you hear about the fact that nothing's been done about it. That kind of, to me, reinforces, as you mentioned previously, like the blame of Rangers. It's like the what's that called when you're incriminated by standing by? I don't know, but
I'm not sure.
yeah, but I'm getting that vibe, of
Yeah,
of,
and
their.
even if these countries are like this, we have no idea if there are like racist people in these countries. I mean, there's probably a lot of regional people in the Czech Republic.
think so.
And this is probably another minority thing that we're just
Mhm.
hearing on social media. But even if it is, let's say worst case scenario, that country's 100% racist. For
Or-
UEFA not
Sure.
to take a stance against it and not to like hold this standard over everyone is like so hypocritical. It's like
Yeah.
unreal. I don't understand how they can have this messaging. Like, do they think people are stupid? Like they've got this message and they're like, yeah guys, we really care, don't worry about it, and then an incident pops up and they're like, you can't prove anything. It's like,
Yeah.
wait a minute, like
Yeah.
hold on, what the fuck are you talking about? I don't understand. It's honestly, it's made me so angry. I think it's an absolute farce. I think it's laughable that like what has gone on. Now,
Mhm.
just to briefly mention it, let's say in this statement that the player was assaulted going down the tunnel.
Right.
You know,
Uh-huh.
that's something that
That-
cameras
that
cameras never
seems
captured.
More
Um,
serious to me. That seems that I don't know. Like in sports, people seem to get physical. I don't know, but to me, the act of actually assaulting someone off the pitch seems fireable easily. Right? Does that is that not how this works? That seems like a no-brainer to me. If you hit someone, then you get off the team. But
well, first of all, I should say that
Okay.
there's no footage of this. This is literally just a statement. When I read this today, I read this statement they brought out today. This is the first I've ever heard of this. So
Mhm.
I don't know. I don't know if it's just them being like, oh well, we did this, but he did that, or what. I don't know. Obviously, they denied it and they've said, but they did something worse.
yeah,
I don't know. Although to answer your point though, I feel like if someone threw a racial slur on the field and he got punched for it, I'd be like, yep, I think that's a reasonable response to that. Like if you're throwing racial slurs about on a pitch, and you got punched, like the player that punched you probably gets sent off. But I think that'd probably be the end of the issue. You know, if it came
I
out that
suppose
he
I
was
see where you're coming
he
from.
was racist.
I don't know. I think it's kind of a slippery slope, isn't it? It's like, oh, he said something bad to you, so you're allowed to hit him. It's like, no, you should all be equally incriminated. So I guess in this case, I kind of understand that none of them were incriminated. It's because if they did incriminate one person, they would have to, by default, incriminate the other.
I think I would come of it from the point of like I think we disagree on this as well. I think there's a level of provoke that someone can have on you that just merits a certain kind of response that you can no longer be reasonably expected to control. And I think having a racial slur like that would probably be one of those incidents where I feel like if you throw a racial slur at someone, if you throw a racial derogatory slur at someone, and you get a punch for it, then I don't think the other person can be reasonably expected to control themselves in that situation if you do something like that. Like I think there's a level of provoke that merits a response like that. Like you can't be allowed to do whatever you want and like never be punished for like doing something like that. I don't think it's reasonable for you to say, for if you know, let's say for example, we don't know what he said, but if he has said the N word, who knows? He might have, and he was to get punched for that. I honestly think that would be a reasonable response from the black player. Like,
Yeah.
and he probably would get sent off at the game at the time. But I would bet that nothing would happen afterwards. After the game.
Yeah, we have discussed this before, and I'm very much of the opinion that I find it hard to imagine a circumstance in which words can warrant a physical altercation. I like to imagine that people. I truly believe that people should be held to higher standards. That if something is past, no matter how insulting it is, that you don't need to start hitting each other. I generally believe that we're past that. I guess in that terms, I guess a form of pacifist. I'm not entirely sure, but I mean outside of that, the way I look at it is in this scenario, we have claims of punching and we have claims of slurs, but from the perspective of the people of the league and of the perspective of the teams, they don't have evidence to prove either of these, so nothing will come of it, because if they address one of the issues, they will inevitably have to address the other issue. And from their perspective, I think they're just wanting that this is clearly grouped up. Like one of these wouldn't have happened without the other. So it's definitely like a twin thing, and it sounds like they're just going to completely deny that any of these happened. It's like I don't know. We didn't see the mouth when anything was spoken. We weren't able to hear it. Surely there's like cameras in the tunnel, Surely.
Well, that was one of the things that I was about to bring up when you see, we don't have. I think, first of all, the fact that we didn't see the guy say whatever it was he said, I don't think that means we can't prove that he said something. For the reasons that we listed earlier.
No, I agree,
think
but
that proves
in terms of legally, in terms of...
Well, that's what I'm saying. If we're talking about what proof is now, I think legally that should be enough evidence to like convict someone. I don't think that...
Oh, really?
Because we don't have a recording of what he said doesn't mean like the things that are like just the fact that the player like covered his mouth, like he knows he's saying something that he shouldn't be saying, like it's so blatantly obvious that he said something that he shouldn't have said that I think that should be legally enough evidence. On the matter of the assault, it says here that the player was assaulted. Now, like I say, this has been 6 days now. This is the first I've heard about it, and if the player was assaulted, it says he was hit with fists in the head. There's going to be a bruise. There's going to be a mark. The statement hasn't come with any pictures, which leads. This is literally just a statement. Which after the fact, it seems like to me after the fact they've just gone, well, they did this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I get.
There's literally nothing on this. Maybe I am a Rangers supporter. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, and I'm probably also a bit biased because I feel so strongly about the race issue. But this seems to me like deflection, because I feel like if a player had been punched, there would be obvious evidence of that. If a player had been hit in the head, there would be a mark. All you'd have to do is take a picture of that, surely.
Yeah, to me it also seems like deflection. But going back to the previous issue, like as much as I agree with you, in my mind I don't have any doubt that a slur was said, but when things get brought to court, which is where this would go if it was taken up seriously, which there would not be enough evidence to prove what was said was said. That's just like that's a fact. In court there needs to be more, and so if it was to get taken further, like if you said if there was to launch an official inquiry, they wouldn't be able to do what you would want them to be able to do.
Yeah. I understand that, but what I'm saying is I think that what we've seen is enough to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that he did say something. The fact that we don't know the exact words that he said and we can't definitively prove them, I don't think that means that there isn't evidence that something's happened. Like I think that the video that we've seen and what's occurred, I think that should be considered definitive proof.
I agree. That's exactly what I'm pointing to. But I'm saying that. But what I'm saying is that if a lawyer was to get involved, he would be able to weasel out of it. There would be. There's absolutely no doubt about that. There's no doubt in my mind that he could get off with this scot-free if people were to try and push this. The only way that I think something could have been done with this was, like you said, if. God, I'm so bad at football. Did you say UEFA? Is that what they're called? The organisation?
Yeah, that's the body that governs Europe.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. If UEFA did make a statement, and like if they took action themselves, if they, instead of hosting a trial or an investigation or an audit or whatever, if they had actually just made a statement and said this behaviour is unacceptable, we will not have in the pitches, you will not be accepted, like that would have been the only outcome out of this that I think would have led to an outcome in which you would want to see. Everything else leads to avenues of people weaseling out of it.
To be fair, that I think that's really all I think should be done, though. I don't think this guy should be put in prison because, like you say, at the end of the day, he's just said he's
for words.
Exactly. That was kind of, we're talking about going to court and stuff like that. I wasn't angling for any sort of like legal action to be taken against him. Because, as much as these people are like bigoted and they're racist, I'm like, can we start outlawing words like this? I don't think that we can. I don't think that's like a reasonable decision to like outlaw words. So
I think in the UK it is illegal to say it, but I agree with you.
I think that at the very well, what should have happened is because UEFA are sort of like, I think they're like a private organisation. They're not like they don't have like there's no
governmental body.
there's no government that could say, oh, you can't not allow this player to play,
No.
sort of thing.
No.
So what I was asking for was for either Slavia Prague to take some sort of action on this player to disconnect themselves from him, which they haven't done. Then the next level of that would be, well, UEFA need to take some action and say, well, if you're not dealing with this, we will. If you don't denounce the player, first of all, he's not playing ever again, and if you don't denounce him, you're not playing ever again. And then when that didn't happen, I think that Rangers should then come out and say they should send out a white guy to be like, we're against racism in every way, shape and form. This is exactly what he said. And
right.
Even at that point, see if Rangers are like breaking contractual rules or they're breaking some sort of law that they've signed into, like how much backlash are they really going to receive at that point? Because if they break that law and then someone brings down the hammer on them, it's going to be like, well, it's so obvious that like surely the public and all of these footballing associations would be able to be like, well, this is now so blatantly, obviously racist. Like, at that point, do you boycott the tournament? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I see. I kind of have an idea now. So basically, the problem we have here is that at each level of culpability where someone get brought up for this, teams are disincentivized. Organizations are disincentivized to make action because right now there would be fiscal losses, and right now there's no reason for them not to try and avoid taking this loss. Right? There's no barrier in place for if a team tries to own up to a player being racist, there's no protection for that team in terms of the money they would lose. If an organization tries to call out a team, there's no barriers in place that would help them recuperate losses they would lose from fans or supporters or ads.
See, but when it comes to UEFA though, Slavia Prague not being in these tournaments would do nothing in terms of their fiscal losses. I don't think. Like it would.
How could that be?
Because
think of how many millions of people in that country must watch this. Must tune in.
but if they weren't in, it would just be a different team. Like it would just be it might be Lisbon. It might be Rome. It might all of these teams are like equal in size. They would bring the same revenue to the competition.
But people from that country will still be tuning in even when their team aren't playing. And if they knew that there was no chance of their team ever having a chance of playing, they might be disincentivized to no longer watch that league.
I mean, well, Slavia Prague isn't the only team from Czech Republic that's in this tournament either. Like, I just think that if you look at the bottom line of what UEFA makes out of all this stuff, if Slavia Prague weren't in the tournament, I think the difference, it might be a little bit different, but I don't think it would be, they wouldn't be worrying about it, I don't think.
I don't know, man. It would also just be bad in terms of relations, like between the organisation and between the country and between the different teams. It's because the teams might be less inclined to be as cooperative. I have no idea what type of money we're talking about here, but I have no doubt that anyone who made a stand in this would have lost money. Right? It seems absolutely. I can't see how that's not the case, and also that almost reinforces why they're doing it in the first place. Because otherwise, they would just admit what happened. Otherwise, they would. It's because there's constantly all this messaging about like Black Lives Matter and against racism and stuff like that. And clearly, the actions that they've done are so opposite to that there has to be a really good reason for them not to have just done it, and it has to be money. There's no other way. So that's why I feel that there has to be some type of like act or something that these companies are like reimbursed for loss, because that's the only way we'll see a change, because right now that's why it's not happening, right?
What about if UEFA had taken a stand and they booted them out and they'd received positive reaction from everybody
that
else?
Would have been brilliant. I guess you're right. There's a chance that they actually could have made more profits, but it comes down to risk management at the end of the day. That there would have been an accountant which had said that we could make this decision and there's a chance that we'll make this much money, or we'll make that decision and there's a chance we'll lose that much money. These are, I'm sure it's not as mundane as that, obviously, but this is the kind of the thought process I imagine that goes behind these decisions. Like maybe we need to make. Maybe there needs to be some effect that's enforced that they would have they would have positively gained out of that decision. You know, I can't possibly imagine what that would be though. How you would enforce that.
I just think that, you know, we're talking about how these companies can like make money by like showing equality. Like
there's no other way.
I just think that the conversations are just so like, they're so unnecessary. I don't understand. Like, I think it comes down to the end of the day how we always talk about how these companies care about money. Like, money seems to be the driving force in like every aspect of life right now. Like, in the same as when we spoke about the LGBTQ issues in the first episode, we have to be concentrating on like happiness and what's right now more than we have to like care about how much money we're making, because UEFA makes an absolute bomb of money in these tournaments every year. I've absolutely no doubt that they make more money than you can possibly imagine on these tournaments every year.
Absolutely no doubt. No doubt.
When you're saying UEFA might have been negatively impacted by the money, I honestly think the money that UEFA would have lost would be negligible, but I do think that the money that Slavia Prague would have lost would be noticeable. Like, if they were to be booted out of Europe, the money that they could potentially gain in the future would be severely impacted. And then that would also enforce them to be like, okay, we have to cut ties from this player because he's now a loss for us. Like, we've made a bad investment in a player that has now got us booted out of Europe. We have to cut ties with the player so that we can get back into Europe and make sure this never happens again. Like, the money that UEFA would have lost would be nothing, but it would have forced Slavia Prague to do something.
I just don't see how we can know how much money would have been lost. Never mind like just international corporations, multinational corporations, their revenue streams are bafflingly complex. It's like so beyond anything that you and I will ever be able to simply picture in our head. There's literally thousands of people, thousands that are devoted just to the act of them making money. So these things, they pan out in obscure, unintuitive ways. I don't think that it's necessarily obvious whatsoever that the amount of money would have been negligible. And also coming back to what we did have previously talked about in an episode was how companies, it's not just about the bottom line, it's also showing growth. It's not just the fact that they need to be making billions of dollars, it's the fact that they need to be making an extra $1 billion over last year, you know, and that kind of compounds a problem as well, where it's not just about the bottom line, it's the growth, and any type of backlash on this type of level, I can only imagine could have impacted that growth. As I said though, I just feel I cannot comment on how that would affect a corporation like UEFA. I really don't. I don't know.
To be honest, at the end of the day, I just don't care. I don't care how much it would affect their bottom line. I don't care how much it'll affect Prague's bottom line. I couldn't care less about how much money this is going to cause. Like, this is no amount of money that people are describing would ever make me think to myself, okay, maybe we'll let this one slide then. You know?
I mean, you think that, sure, but the person that's in charge of making money for that company, that is all that matters to them. You know, they fundamentally don't care about the racism. It's because they are not trained to care about that. So I understand I totally understand where you're coming from. Like, it's wrong, it's hypocritical, but unfortunately we need to be like mature enough to realize that just saying they should sacrifice money because it's morally wrong will never ever happen.
But I think that companies like UEFA, like organisations like UEFA, have to be doing things like that. I think that's the direction that they have to be moving in right now. You know, it's just what's right. It's what's right in the world to be doing stuff like that. That's the direction that they have to be moving in. They have to get away from this money as the be all and end all of everything that we do. I mean, and I reckon there's probably a decent chance that if they were to do this, if they were to cut ties with Slavia Prague would just get rid of the player and then they just play in the tournament for the rest. Like, you know, because UEFA would say, if UEFA were to turn around and say, you know, if you don't condone him, you're out, Slavia Prague wouldn't say, okay, we're not playing then. They would just fire the player.
They'd get rid of the player, sure.
And then they'd be back
I totally agree with you. Yeah, no.
Like, UEFA have the power to do that and they're choosing not to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It just makes me wonder why though. Like I don't understand if if that was the case, then the situation you're describing would be minimal money loss, and it would be a better image of the corporation. And in this scenario we're describing, it only sounds like positives. You know, because as much as I'm talking about money, you know, if it was relatively small amount of profits that we're talking about here, I do believe that a company would be willing to sacrifice that in order to come out looking more progressive and more forward. Because this could have been a publicity stunt at the end of the day. This could be a PR move.
Yeah.
They could have looked good at the end of this. I totally agree with you, but for some reason they chose not to do that, and that's what makes me think that maybe there is some other mechanism in place here. I don't understand. It's sickening though. I see this with I see this with companies all the time. Is decisions that are made purely monetarily and have no consequence or thought for the real world issues that they're pretending to preach. It's like it's similar to all these companies that preach fucking bullshit about being carbon neutral by 2040, but working in companies like that, or seeing people that work in these companies, you know that no actions are being made. You know that at the end of the day, if something's cheaper with a higher CO2 emission, they're going to go with what's cheaper. You know, it's just more corporate bullshit and pandering to people that seems to happen throughout the entire world. And as I kind of said earlier, like football is just as much the corporate world as much as, you know, construction is, and they'll be willing to cut these corners in order to save money, even at the expense of public image. So I guess now I'm thinking about it, I don't think we did come out this hot-headed, really. I understand the frustration, and I think it's the effect that we're talking about right now is legitimately just a huge part of the world that we see around us, and it is what we're always harping on about, the fact that everything is so utterly incentivized by money. But this is a scenario where, in my opinion, I don't see how we could get about it unless coming up with some sort of financial incentive. It's because that's just how it ticks, right?
Yeah, so I understand what you're saying about financial incentive, but I feel like if you were to put in a financial incentive for something like this, what are you going to reward companies for firing racists every year? Like,
well, that's what I mean. I don't know, but there needs to be maybe not incentive, but there needs to be like like an insurance or something. I don't know. I'm not financially
I think it comes
savvy.
down to a little bit of like personal responsibility. Like if you're, you know, like on a like vote for your wallet level, like vote with your wallet. Sorry, is what I mean. Like as if you're seeing this racist sort of stuff in these competitions, like don't pay for the service. You know, like if you're seeing stuff like this, like stream the games online. You know, like
Sure.
go to a dodgy
Right.
website and do it. Like don't give them your money if this is what's happening. You know,
Yeah.
because this can't continue, and I'd quite happily tell someone to not pay for these games and to go, and I'd be like, you can actually go and view it on this website for free, and you don't give your money to this corporation because they're racist. Like I'd be quite happy to like tell people to do that.
Yeah.
And
I think that this is the type of thing that categorically proves the insincerity of businesses. This is like, you know, I do not pay for Disney. I will never pay for Disney because they keep literal concentration camps. You know, talk about people preaching and then doing something under the table. Disney's one of these most progressive, forward companies in the entire world right now, and then they literally work in association with a communist state. You know, these are the type of companies that I will never endorse, and I know full well, and I believe that nothing is ever going to change the way that Disney practices unless there's some massive reform. But the personal step I take is by not consuming Disney products. You know, unfortunately, that excludes Star Wars.
yeah, I think it has to be to have any sort of financial backlash. People have to make like a stand. And unfortunately, I feel like that would be on such a monumental scale that it's probably never going to happen unless something is like so. You know, because I think that there are people that will take the stance on this issue in particular. You know, we can't see what he said. We'll never know what he said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are people that will take that stance, and until there is something that's so abhorrent that we have to that everyone has to object to it.
So inarguable, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Until something like that happens, there's just not going to be any action.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Unfortunately, it's one of those things. It's like, what will possibly be enough? You know, and it's almost hard to imagine. Like, I'm sorry, I'm drawing the analogy with Disney again because I find it's really simple in the scenario. Like, are we gonna need to like see a sweatshop worker hired by Disney in a Disney film before we make the realization? Like, I don't. Will in the UEFA, will we need to see someone beat a black person to death because they're racist? You know, like, how is this? I don't know how it's ever going to happen, particularly with what we're mentioning right now, where it seems the actual organisations involved actively cover up these actions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's
yeah, I don't know.
I think the takeaway has to be that we are small in the games that are being played, not football games, you know, the corporate games, the financial games that are being played here, and we can only choose to make actions that represent our values. And I don't have much more to say, unfortunately, you know?
Yeah, I think we're probably seeing that the only way to move forward in this is for people to take a little bit of personal responsibility, you know, to say, you know, well, I'll be one less viewer that you'll get for your adverts, you know? I'm not paying for your subscription or whatever it is. I think that's probably it. Because we're not going to see any government action on this. I don't think we can see any government action on this without some sort of corruption inevitably following that.
Right.
So it's got to be some sort of monetary disincentive. Is that a word? I don't know.
Disincentive.
Some monetary disincentive that they're seeing on their end, which apparently they are not at the moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is a pretty grim way when you think about it, but it's something that is a consistent theme of our episodes, you know, is that we're aware that these things happen, that the way the world works is unfortunately through money, and it can have really nasty, horrific consequences, like in this scenario.
Yeah, so it's a pretty grim way to end the episode, I think. It's a horrible incident. I don't think I'm any less angry about it now than I was when I started this conversation, to be honest. I don't think that's going to
be the case.
I now think it's quite righteous anger that I've spoke about it, because it's a horrible incident. It's so unfortunate that a player has been subjected to this because of his race. It's, you know, and you and I speak about this all the time, about how, you know, no one's any different, you know, like we're talking about black people, talking about trans people, like we're all the same, we're all just people, we're all just trying to work towards a common goal, you know, we're one team, and that's Team Earth. Go Team Earth! Woo, you know what I'm saying?
Woo, Team Earth! Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, let's make it to 2050.
Carbon neutral by 2040.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. There is a, as much as it's grim, you know, there is a lining to it, and in that we do define our own morals. At the end of the day, that we know that these organisations can have their own, but we need to hold ourselves to our own idealisation of these morals at the end of the day, and having an awareness of how the world works can only sharpen your own awareness of morality, which I think just leads to generally a more understanding person. And, you know, eventually one day down the line, you might be the boss of like a factory floor, you might be a CEO of a FTSE 100 company, and then that'll be the day when you are making these decisions, and that's the only way that change will happen over extremely long periods of time. And, you know, maybe by the time we're 80, the world might be completely driven by happiness, sunshine, and flowers. That'd be something, wouldn't it?
That's been episode 3 of Guide to the 21st Century. Thank you guys for listening. If you guys have been listening since episode 1 and you're still listening, we can only scarcely imagine why. But yeah, I think those are 2 good topics this week again. I've already got a good idea of what I'm talking about next week, so looking forward to that one as well.
Yeah. Okay, we'll catch you then. Once again, we're going to be uploading on YouTube. Very shortly, we're going to be on iTunes and Spotify once we get this RSS feed thing sorted out. So we'll catch you there.
Yeah, we're aiming for about 6 a.m. on Mondays. We think we've heard people listen to their podcast on the way to their work. So 6 a.m. on Monday next week.
Yeah, we'll catch you on the road.